We have Ajmer Dale here, who's the Chief Accounting Officer of Square. Thank you for being with us today.
Hey, John, nice to be with you.
I mean, I think most people know Square, but from your own words, why don't you tell us a little bit about the company?
Sure. Square started about 10 years ago, and the initial sort of concept for Square was really unlocking the access of small and medium-sized businesses, what we call our sellers, to give them utility to access the payment card networks, right? So the issue being that a lot of small businesses couldn't take a credit card payment, and so where cash was prohibitive, they lost a sale. And so where Jack in his innate wisdom came in was to build a solution that allowed those sellers to actually have the wherewithal to access the payment card networks and therefore, conduct the sale and grow their business. So that was, 10 years or so ago. What we've seen since then, over the last 10 years, is that sellers need a lot more to understand, to learn and grow their business. So we've actually developed a product suite of 30 discrete individual products for our sellers, which encompass hardware, software, as well as financial services to enable them to actually grow their businesses. And we've created what we call a sticky, sort of a commerce ecosystem. So once you're in that ecosystem, you can avail yourselves of all these different tools to help you manage your business. So really sort of a one-stop solution, hopefully, for sellers as they manage their business. So that was the sort of the initial concept with our seller ecosystem. And then in parallel to that, we've actually developed a secondary ecosystem, what we call the Cash App. And what that is doing is allowing individuals to sort of manage their funds. And through a mobile app, you have the utility to send, store, spend, receive, and also invest in either equities or Bitcoin from your mobile application on your phone, right? So that sort of democratizes a lot of the access to the financial system for a lot of underserved users that didn't have that capability previously. So that sort of creates another ecosystem, that we've developed over the last 3 or 4 years as well.
Now, you have a wealth of experience. Jaguar, Ford took SolarCity public. What made you want to join Square?
I think I've always been interested in joining companies that are disruptors, right? So irrespective of what industry they're in. So as you've mentioned, SolarCity, they disrupted the clean energy industry wherein, we're trying to tackle global warming. And also with Square, our sort of mission of economic empowerment and sort of democratizing access for underserved individuals to join the financial system was also very compelling and sort of noble cause that I could get behind, and sort of that resonated with me.
On that mission of economic empowerment, it's been obviously an incredibly challenging time, with COVID for small businesses in particular. How has the mission changed, or how has the mission been strengthened, or how has the mission been put to use in the past year?
Yeah, I think it's really sort of reinforced the mission, right, and the value that we can bring, especially given the pandemic. It was obvious that we had a role to play, given the individuals and the businesses that were most severely impacted by COVID. And so we leaned in there. So we looked at our roadmap on the seller business and thought, okay, what can we accelerate? What can we now bring forward to sort of help our sellers? And so we looked at different opportunities there, such as, providing PPP assistance. We partnered with the SBA to become a PPP lender. And so we're able to create a platform that allowed the sellers to have access to PPP loans, understand the rules around what those loans entailed, and also distribute that cash as well in a more seamless and quicker fashion. Similarly with the Cash App, we participated in the CARES Act such that stimulus payments could go out the door quicker rather than via normal sort of checks in the mail. We were able to deposit balances into individuals' mobile phone apps such that they had more immediate utility to spend that cash. We also looked at how our sellers are actually conducting business. So if you think about it, Square was born out of servicing those brick and mortar types of businesses that had a physical presence. Now, when most of your buyers now are remote and there's no in-person sort of buying happening, they need to change that business sort of methodology and come up with what we call a more omni-channel presence, right? So meet your buyers wherever they may be. So that could be online, it could be offline, it could be mobile. So we'd already created a suite of products that allowed our sellers to sort of migrate to have a more omni-channel presence. And so we just accelerated that and ensured that our sellers had the wherewithal and the support to actually launch their own omni-channel presence for whatever business they were in.
There's been so much business model innovation at the company. You start with the Square Reader, then you've got the Register, then you've got the Cash App, then you've got those, I guess I left out 27 of the other touch points that the company has. What is the role of finance and specifically accounting in supporting that?
Yeah, it's important. I mean, look, you've heard the phrase, innovate or die, right? And that's just as important for Square as it is for other companies. The fintech space is hugely competitive, right? There's a lot of competition in the different verticals that Square tries to address. So it's important that we create products that have utility with our customers, right, with our sellers. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we've got to be first to market with new solutions, but we've got to come up with the products that have the most resonance and have the most utility, right? That'll have more of a meaningful impact. And the way accounting sort of helps there is to provide the guidance and the guardrails such that the company can feel like it can still innovate, right? What we want to try to create is an atmosphere or an environment where we've got a startup culture within a public company, right? We don't want to lose that. And that's what's made us successful over the last few years. And so we want to tap into that to make sure that folks feel as though they can innovate. We provide the guardrails of what is possible, right, in the construct of a public company and our reporting parameters. And then they just go for it, right? And so, we placed a lot of bets in different areas. Some we've learned from, some have failed, and some obviously have done very well.
You made the move to cloud ERP and EPM back in 2018. How important was the move to these cloud systems? And particularly in light of the pandemic, how important was it to have these systems in the cloud?
Yeah, it's been a huge win for us in terms of our foresight to actually move to the cloud back in 2018. Jack has been a big proponent of a distributed workforce model, right? And so what the pandemic did is it accelerated that desire, right? So now everybody's working remotely. And so to have an infrastructure, at least from my perspective, that is standardized globally, right, accessible very easily, and has data integrity, is critical, right? And so as we have launched into different geographical markets, it's important for us that we have standardization in terms of our policies and procedures, and the cloud allows that to happen. I think we've also been able to tap into some of the next generation of technologies that Oracle is very focused on. If you think about AI, machine learning, those are very congruent with Square and our philosophy about being innovative, right? And so we want to use the best-in-class tools, right? And partnering with Oracle and having access to their cloud suite of products has enabled that acceleration for us as well in the construct of working with a remote distributed workforce. We've had to close the books, we've had to report just as we've normally done, right? There's been no sort of dispensations given to us, so we've had to figure it out. But having the right tooling is therefore very critical in how you assess how you're going to tackle this new working model that you're in.
The cloud is so often associated with resiliency, but for your business, there's so many scenario plannings that you need to be able to do. New product launches, existing products, see how they're performing, model out different scenarios. How has cloud enabled you to do that from a finance perspective?
Yeah, very much so. I think, as you'll know, with the pandemic, it's been very important for us to run multiple scenarios, right? Because the landscape has been changing. Parts of the country and parts of the world have been opening and they've been closing. Our sellers have been impacted in different ways. And so from our perspective, it's important that we have a homogeneous sort of data source that becomes the sort of single source of truth, because that's effectively what we're going to use to help come up with our new scenario plans in terms of plan A, B, or C, or whatever it might be, right? So I think having a cloud infrastructure where you've got homogeneous data that is accessible by everyone is critical. It helps faster decision making, right? You don't need to sort of drive so much more consensus building because everybody agrees that those are the right numbers to be looking at, right? That's critical. As we also think about business metrics as well, that's been another area that we've had to really pay key attention to our key performance indicators, right? And so enabling more turnkey reporting with the cloud infrastructure allows us to do that, right? We have more turnkey reporting that is done with greater velocity, and that also helps us in terms of our decision making and our sort of and how we're pivoting to help our customers and our sellers.
Let's take kind of a case study or an example. Let's look at all the innovation that you guys are doing in crypto. How does cloud and cloud finance allow you to measure the success of that effort, or different kind of yardsticks as to how it's doing?
Yeah, look, we've got a lot of innovative products, right? I think just within the Cash App, you've got fractional share trading, and also cryptocurrency, right, is a utility that's available in the application. So from our perspective, is important, especially when a product is very nascent, is that we can measure profitability, right, to see how it is performing. Do we double down? How can we learn from the experience in terms of the financial metrics and the engagement that a certain product is getting? And so, so having and capturing that information on a cloud application such as Oracle and using Oracle Analytics really helps us focus and address those concerns, right? And so, as we continue to innovate, we're always, habitually looking at the feedback that we're getting from the early adopters to see how we can iterate on the products, how we can continue to innovate to really address the market and where the market is going. And a lot of these are, very new products that we've launched, and it's compelling to see how others have sort of joined on the bandwagon as Square sort of stolen the march a little bit here. But it is only as good as the data that you can derive from the launch of new products, how you think about the next iteration, and so that becomes very critical for us.
What advice would you have for other CFOs, whether it is in managing a business that has some level of the innovation that your business has? I don't think many have that level of innovation, but certainly some level of it. And then secondly, in operating a cloud-based finance environment.
Over the last year, we've learned a lot, right, operating in this environment. And I think the easy thing to do is look at your own business internally and say, okay, we've got to start cutting costs or delay costs, right? I'm not saying that's not one sort of vector of work that needs to be done. We did that as well. What needs to be done? What's a must-have? What can be pushed out? And sort of we looked at this both internally and externally in terms of how to approach the pandemic. Internally, how strong were we and from a balance sheet perspective, right? Luckily for us, we did a fundraise a year ago. So in February 2020, we did a convertible debt offering. And so that really emboldened our balance sheet to put us in a position to actually help our sellers and our customers. And then what did we do then? We actually put ourselves in the seat of our sellers. What do they need? How can we help, right? And so I think having that perspective was key, right? Because it would drive bigger loyalty, more engagement. Because if we're standing behind our sellers in a time of critical need, they'll remember that. And so that was a very much an inflection point for us, and how we hopefully have added value to support our sellers. In addition to that, it's critical to have an infrastructure that allows you to scenario plan and be nimble, right? Irrespective of what industry you're in, how much data you're trying to collapse and sort of slice and dice, I think it becomes very important that you're able to have a roadmap of how you're going to tackle the pandemic, right? And so having the right infrastructure or cloud solution, whatever it is you're using, to help you in that regard, that is more turnkey, I think becomes very, very important.
Ajmer, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it.